The story of the ancient world is a tapestry woven with ambition, power, betrayal, love, and the rise and fall of empires that shaped the course of human history. Long before modern nations and borders existed, vast civilizations arose along the fertile valleys of great rivers, in harsh deserts, and atop rugged mountains, where kings and queens wielded authority that was often absolute, and where the fate of millions could hinge on the whim of a single ruler. In Mesopotamia, often called the cradle of civilization, the Sumerians established some of the first cities in history, creating intricate systems of governance, religion, and writing that allowed human society to move beyond mere survival into the realm of organized culture. Kings such as Gilgamesh became legendary figures, not only for their feats of leadership but also for their deeds and failings, which were immortalized in epic tales that blended fact and myth. These early stories of heroism, divine favor, and human error set a precedent for centuries to come, illustrating how the ambitions of individuals could shape the destiny of entire peoples. Across the Fertile Crescent, city-states like Uruk, and Babylon grew into centers of wealth and innovation, with towering ziggurats reaching toward the heavens and legal codes such as Hammurabi's reflecting the complexities of administering justice in societies increasingly dependent on law and order. Meanwhile, in Egypt, the Nile River fostered the development of a civilization whose rulers claimed divine authority as pharaohs, acting as both kings and gods on earth. From the Old Kingdom to the New Kingdom, Egyptian society revolved around the stability and continuity provided by the pharaoh, who was charged with maintaining Ma'at, the cosmic order. The construction of monumental pyramids, temples, and tombs was not simply a display of wealth and engineering prowess, but a statement of political and spiritual power, ensuring that the pharaoh's legacy would endure for eternity. Love, loyalty, and betrayal were recurring themes even in the royal households of Egypt, as dynastic struggles for power, assassinations, and palace intrigues shaped the course of events. The lives of rulers like Hatshepsut, who assumed power as a female pharaoh in a male-dominated world, or Akhenaten, who attempted a radical religious revolution, illustrate the personal and political complexities that intertwined to create the fascinating narrative of ancient Egyptian history. To the east, the Indus Valley civilization flourished along the banks of the Indus River, with cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa showcasing sophisticated urban planning, trade networks, and social organization. Though much of their written records remain undeciphered, archaeological evidence reveals a society deeply concerned with structure, commerce, and daily life, hinting at stories of ordinary people and rulers whose ambitions and rivalries remain hidden beneath the sands of time. Farther north, the great civilizations of China began to emerge along the Yellow River, where legendary figures such as the Yellow Emperor and the Sage Kings established the foundations of culture, governance, and philosophy. Dynasties like the Xia, Shang, and Zhou laid the groundwork for political organization, ritual, and belief systems that would endure for millennia, demonstrating how the rise of empires often combined pragmatic governance with deeply held myths of divine right and ancestral authority. In these societies, love and betrayal were as potent as military conquest, shaping alliances, marriages, and familial loyalty, with consequences that could determine the survival of entire dynasties. Meanwhile, across the Aegean Sea, The early civilizations of Crete and Mycenae set the stage for the epic tales of Greece. Kings such as Minos of Crete, whose palace at Knossos became a legendary labyrinth, and Agamemnon of Mycenae, whose hubris led to both military triumphs and domestic tragedy, illustrate how mythology and historical events blended to form enduring narratives. The story of the Trojan War, immortalized in Homer's epics, is emblematic of the ancient world's preoccupation with heroism, honor, and the fatal consequences of passion and betrayal. In these early societies, the lives of rulers, warriors, and ordinary people were intertwined in a complex web of familial duty, political ambition, and divine intervention, highlighting how personal choices could reverberate across generations and shape the fate of kingdoms. In Mesopotamia, the Akkadian Empire, under the ambitious rule of Sargon the Great, became one of the first entities to unite multiple city-states under a single ruler, demonstrating how conquest and administrative innovation could extend the power of one man across vast territories. Sargon's legacy is not only political but also symbolic, showing how the desire for dominance and the consolidation of authority created stories that would be remembered for centuries. His successors faced the same human challenges: rebellion, betrayal among generals, and the need to maintain loyalty through rewards, fear, and ritual. These patterns repeated themselves across empires as leaders struggled to balance ambition with the practical realities of governing diverse populations. In Egypt, the period of the Middle Kingdom brought tales of love, loyalty, and political intrigue that rivaled the great epics of Mesopotamia. Pharaohs such as Senusret III not only led military campaigns, but also navigated internal court politics, ensuring that loyal allies were rewarded while potential rivals were neutralized. Women of royal blood often played pivotal roles, leveraging marriage and motherhood to influence succession, protect dynastic continuity, or even seize power themselves. These stories of domestic maneuvering were as consequential as battles fought on the fields of war, illustrating how human relationships shaped the destiny of nations as much as military might or divine favor. Across the ancient world, the theme of betrayal is particularly striking, as it often determined the rise or fall of empires. In Babylon, the ambitious court officials and generals sometimes conspired against their kings, while in the Hittite Empire, assassination and intrigue were tools for political survival. Love and personal loyalty intersected with power, as marriages between royal families could seal alliances or provoke conflict, while illicit affairs or jealous rivalries could spark wars. These human dramas remind us that history is not solely the story of armies and kings, but also of the passions, fears, and ambitions of ordinary people acting in extraordinary circumstances. In the Mediterranean, the rise of the city-states of Sumer, Akkad, and later Greece demonstrates the interplay of human ambition and societal development. Kings and leaders sought to legitimize their rule through both military conquest and symbolic acts of piety, constructing temples, monuments, and records of their achievements that would immortalize them in stone and text. These acts were often motivated by a mixture of love for family, devotion to gods, and the desire for enduring fame, but they also set the stage for betrayal, as rivals sought to usurp power or undermine authority through cunning or outright violence. The epics, myths, and inscriptions that survive from these civilizations provide glimpses into the lives of rulers and subjects, revealing that while centuries may separate us from these events, the fundamental human experiences of ambition, fear, love, and revenge remain constant. As the great empires of the ancient world expanded, they encountered each other in trade, warfare, and diplomacy, creating stories that spanned continents and cultures. The Egyptians traded with Nubia, the Mesopotamians with the Indus Valley, and the Hittites with the Mediterranean kingdoms, generating both cooperation and conflict. Marriages between royal families, treaties negotiated with careful attention to loyalty and honor, and the betrayal of trusted allies were all part of the intricate web of politics that defined the era. Leaders learned that power was fragile, that victory in battle did not guarantee lasting authority, and that personal relationships could shape the fate of empires as much as armies and resources. Even the most legendary love stories of the ancient world, such as that of Cleopatra and Mark Antony, highlight the intricate interplay between personal passion and political necessity. In these cases, the bonds of affection intertwined with ambition, with decisions in the bedroom often having consequences on the battlefield. Betrayal, whether by lovers, generals, or advisors, was a recurring theme, reminding us that the personal and the political were inseparable in societies where authority was concentrated in the hands of a few individuals. Throughout the ancient world, the stories of kings and empires illustrate a fundamental truth. Human ambition is both a driving force for creation and a source of destruction. Empires rise on the strength of vision and strategy, but often fall because of greed, misjudgment, or betrayal. Love, in its many forms, romantic, familial, or political, can inspire loyalty and unity, but it can also provoke jealousy, envy, and civil strife. These patterns repeat across civilizations, from Mesopotamia to Egypt, from the Indus Valley to the Mediterranean, demonstrating that despite differences in culture, geography, and technology, the human experience remains strikingly consistent. As the ancient world matured, the scale of human ambition expanded beyond city-states into vast empires, where the desires of kings, generals, and conquerors could reshape entire continents. In Persia, the Achaemenid Empire rose to prominence under Cyrus the Great, whose vision of tolerance, administration, and strategic diplomacy allowed a diverse empire stretching from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea to flourish. Cyrus is remembered not only for his military brilliance, but also for his political foresight, allowing local customs and religions to persist while consolidating his authority through loyalty, tribute, and the careful selection of governors. Yet even within this remarkable system, betrayal lurked at every corner. Revolts in distant provinces, treacherous nobles, and rival claimants to the throne constantly threatened the stability of the empire, reminding us that the genius of rulers was often measured not only in victories on the battlefield but in the capacity to survive intrigue and treachery. The story of Persia exemplifies how ambition, strategy, and human complexity intertwined, creating both enduring achievement and profound drama. Across the Mediterranean, the Greek city-states entered a period of remarkable intellectual, artistic, and military development. Yet even in this era, the personal ambitions of rulers and generals could shape the fate of entire civilizations. The Persian Wars, pitting Athens and Sparta against the mighty Persian Empire, illustrate the collision of empires driven by both principle and self-interest. Leaders such as Themistocles, Leonidas, and Xerxes became immortalized in history not just for their battlefield feats but for the choices they made, the alliances they forged, and the betrayals they endured. In the heat of war, acts of courage and treachery often occurred side by side. Generals who switched sides, allies who reneged on promises, and kings whose overreach led to disaster. In Greece, the tension between city-state independence and imperial ambition produced endless stories of human drama, highlighting how even the greatest leaders were constrained by both circumstance and the unpredictable behavior of those around them. The story of Alexander the Great epitomizes the intersection of conquest, ambition, and personal relationships in the classical world. Born to Philip II of Macedonia, Alexander inherited not only a kingdom but also an army trained to extend his father's vision across Greece and beyond. With remarkable speed and tactical brilliance, he conquered Persia, Egypt, and parts of India, creating an empire that stretched farther than any before him. Yet his story is also one of betrayal and tragedy. Friends and generals who had fought beside him for years were executed when suspicion or jealousy took hold, cities resisted and were destroyed, and alliances formed out of convenience dissolved as swiftly as they were made. Alexander's personal relationships, including his close companionship with Hephaestion and his marriages to Persian and Central Asian princesses, illustrate how love, loyalty, and politics were inseparable. His untimely death at the age of 32 plunged the empire into chaos, with his generals, known as the Diadochi, dividing the territory through further intrigue, warfare, and betrayal, demonstrating that even the most brilliant conquerors could not control the legacies they left behind. Meanwhile, in Rome, the rise of the Republic and later the Empire brought its own dramas of ambition, betrayal, and love. Figures like Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus illustrate how personal rivalries and political machinations could determine the fate of millions. Caesar's military campaigns in Gaul extended Rome's power, but his crossing of the Rubicon was a decisive act that ignited civil war, illustrating the profound consequences of individual ambition. The assassination of Caesar on the Ides of March, carried out by senators who feared both his power and the end of the Republic, is one of history's most famous examples of betrayal, where personal loyalty, fear, and political philosophy collided in a moment that would change the world. Meanwhile, love and alliances played crucial roles. Caesar's relationship with Cleopatra in Egypt intertwined romance with political strategy, illustrating how personal and political motives were often inseparable. The subsequent rise of Augustus and the establishment of the Roman Empire highlight how the consolidation of power required not only military skill but also political acumen, diplomacy, and the management of human relationships. Augustus, formerly Octavian, navigated a world of rival claimants, family disputes, and shifting loyalties to establish himself as the first emperor of Rome. The story of his rise demonstrates how careful strategy, combined with opportunism and the ability to manipulate perception, can turn a fragile position into absolute authority. Behind the grand architecture, imperial bureaucracy, and public spectacles lay a web of intrigue, marriages, betrayals, and alliances, reminding us that even the most celebrated leaders relied on the complex interplay of human ambition and social structure to maintain their power. In the East, empires such as the Maurya and Qin in India and China respectively show similar patterns of ambition, conquest, and internal intrigue. Chandragupta Maurya, guided by the wisdom of his advisor Chanakya, rose from obscurity to unify much of India, demonstrating the interplay of strategy, political cunning, and the exploitation of rivalries among local rulers. In China, the Qin dynasty, under the iron-handed rule of Qin Shi Huang, achieved remarkable feats, from the unification of warring states to the construction of the Great Wall, yet the brutality and suspicion that characterized his reign also created enduring legacies of fear, betrayal, and the precariousness of absolute power. These stories illustrate a recurring theme in ancient history. The same ambition that builds an empire also sows the seeds of its potential downfall, and personal relationships, whether loving or treacherous, have consequences that resonate across generations. The ancient world was also a stage for the power of women, whose influence often shaped empires in ways that were subtle, profound, and sometimes lethal. Figures such as Cleopatra in Egypt, Olympias in Macedonia, and Boudica in Britain exemplify the ways women exercised agency, forged alliances, and inspired loyalty and rebellion. Their stories are inseparable from the political and military narratives of their time, demonstrating that love, familial loyalty, and personal ambition could challenge or bolster the authority of men in positions of absolute power. Whether through marriage, diplomacy, or revolt, these women left indelible marks on history, often in societies that sought to limit their roles, reminding us that influence can take many forms and that history is shaped not only by kings and generals, but by those whose courage, cunning, or passion alters the course of events. In Mesopotamia, the later empires of Assyria and Babylon continued to dramatize the interplay of war, ambition, and human emotion. Assyrian kings were renowned for their military campaigns and strategic prowess, yet the constant threat of revolt, palace intrigue, and the fragile loyalties of conquered peoples required vigilance and ruthlessness. In Babylon, leaders such as Nebuchadnezzar II combined military expansion with architectural and cultural achievement, building grand palaces and temples that showcase their authority while simultaneously inspiring loyalty and fear. Personal ambition, political strategy, and the potential for betrayal were constant companions of these rulers, demonstrating that the most powerful empires relied as much on managing relationships and perception as on the might of armies. The interconnections of empires across the ancient world also created stories of diplomacy, espionage, and romance. Trade routes from Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley and beyond facilitated not only commerce, but the exchange of culture, religion, and ideas, while also creating opportunities for intrigue. Envoys could be spies, marriages could secure alliances or provoke enmity, and acts of personal loyalty or betrayal could alter the balance of power in faraway lands. The tapestry of human relationships, entwined with the ambitions of rulers and the fortunes of empires, demonstrates that the story of the ancient world is as much about human emotion, decision-making, and interaction as it is about conquest, territory, or technology. As the classical world evolved, the stage was set for empires whose ambitions and conflicts would reshape the Mediterranean and beyond, where the fates of cities, kings, and ordinary citizens were inextricably linked to the desires and flaws of those who wielded power. In the Western Mediterranean, Carthage rose as a maritime and commercial powerhouse, commanding trade networks that stretched across the Mediterranean and North Africa. Its leaders, most famously Hannibal Barca, exemplified both military genius and personal audacity, as Hannibal's crossing of the Alps with elephants to confront Rome remains one of the most legendary feats in military history. Yet the story of Carthage is also one of betrayal, miscalculation, and the fragility of even the most formidable empires. Political rivalries within Carthage, conflicts among generals, and the relentless pressure of Roman expansion culminated in the Punic Wars, a struggle defined as much by personal ambition and strategic cunning as by armies and resources. Hannibal's victories on Italian soil were brilliant, but ultimately, the inability to secure adequate support from Carthage's political elite led to his eventual defeat, illustrating the eternal tension between individual brilliance and the broader demands of governance. Meanwhile, the Hellenistic world, born from the conquests of Alexander the Great, became a mosaic of kingdoms and dynasties ruled by his former generals, known as the Diadochi. These successor states, from the Seleucid Empire in Persia to the Ptolemaic Kingdom in Egypt and the Antigonid dynasty in Macedonia, illustrate the precarious nature of power and the constant interplay of ambition, loyalty, and betrayal. Dynastic marriages, assassinations, and military campaigns were all instruments in the pursuit of control, while the blending of Greek culture with local traditions gave rise to cities like Alexandria, Antioch, and Pergamon, where art, science, and philosophy flourished amidst political instability. The Ptolemies of Egypt, in particular, demonstrate how love, intrigue, and ambition could shape history. Cleopatra VII, the last of the Ptolemaic rulers, navigated a dangerous world of Roman politics, leveraging her intelligence, charm, and alliances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony to preserve her dynasty. Yet even her brilliance could not withstand the tides of history, as the defeat by Octavian led to the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and Egypt's absorption into the Roman Empire, showing that even the most calculated strategies and profound personal relationships could be swept aside by larger forces. Rome itself was ascending to dominance, and its internal dramas rivaled any tale of kings and empires. The Punic Wars, particularly the confrontations with Carthage, were as much about personal leadership, loyalty, and betrayal as they were about territory or resources. Scipio Africanus, for example, achieved lasting fame not only through battlefield prowess, but also through political acumen, navigating the complexities of Roman politics, family obligations, and alliances with foreign powers. Within Rome, the struggles of the Republic illustrate the recurring patterns of ambition, rivalry, and the pursuit of legacy. Senators, generals, and magistrates constantly negotiated a delicate balance between cooperation and competition, where betrayal could take the form of legislation, assassination, or military rebellion. Love, too, played a decisive role, as marriages were political instruments designed to secure alliances, consolidate power, and protect family legacies, highlighting that in Rome, as in many ancient societies, personal relationships were inseparable from the broader sweep of history. Beyond the Mediterranean, the ancient world was also experiencing remarkable developments in the Americas. In Mesoamerica, the Olmecs laid the foundation for civilizations that would later include the Maya and Aztec, with cities organized around monumental architecture, religious observances, and complex social hierarchies. These societies, while geographically distant from the Mediterranean and Near East, shared the same human preoccupations with power, loyalty, and the influence of charismatic leaders. Kings and priest-kings wielded authority derived from divine sanction, directing labor, trade, and warfare, while stories of conquest, alliance, and rebellion circulated within and between city-states. Similarly, in the Andean region, early civilizations such as the Chavan developed sophisticated religious and cultural systems, illustrating that the human drive to organize society, pursue ambition, and immortalize leadership was universal, transcending continent and climate. These civilizations, though often separated by thousands of miles, demonstrate parallel patterns: rulers whose ambitions could uplift or devastate, societies shaped by loyalty and betrayal, and legacies that endure in monumental architecture, artifacts, and oral tradition. The dynamics of empire, ambition, and human emotion became increasingly complex as Rome expanded into the Hellenistic world. Military conquest and diplomacy were intertwined, with generals navigating not only enemy armies, but also the loyalties of subordinates, the expectations of citizens, and the intrigues of rival states. Alliances forged through marriage or treaty could be undone by jealousy, greed, or the shifting tides of power, while acts of personal betrayal often precipitated wars or civil strife. Within Rome itself, figures like Pompey, Crassus, and Julius Caesar illustrate how ambition could propel an individual to unprecedented heights while simultaneously sowing the seeds of conflict. The assassination of Caesar, the subsequent civil wars, and the eventual rise of Augustus demonstrate that the consolidation of power required not only military skill but a profound understanding of human psychology, the management of loyalty, and the anticipation of rivals' actions. Love, ambition, and betrayal, intertwined constantly, shaping the destiny of one of history's most powerful empires. In Egypt, under the Ptolemies, the intersection of love, diplomacy, and political intrigue is particularly striking. Cleopatra's intelligence and charisma allowed her to navigate a perilous world dominated by Rome, forming alliances with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony. Yet these relationships were fraught with danger, as competing factions, family rivalries, and Roman ambition constantly threatened her position. Cleopatra's story is emblematic of how personal relationships, particularly those of women in positions of power, could determine the fate of nations. Betrayal, whether in the form of familial treachery or political maneuvering, was ever present, demonstrating that even skill, charm, and intelligence could not fully protect rulers from the precariousness of power. The pattern of ambition, betrayal, and love repeated itself in the Eastern world as well. The Mauryan Empire in India reached its height under Ashoka, whose transformation from conqueror to a ruler devoted to peace and Buddhist principles illustrates the profound impact of personal choice on history. Yet even in a reign marked by moral reflection, the consolidation of power, the handling of dissent, and the management of relationships with governors and neighboring states remained central to imperial survival. In China, the Warring States period and the unification under Qin Shi Huang highlight similar dynamics, where military conquest, political strategy, and the elimination of rivals were necessary to establish lasting authority. Personal ambition, loyalty, betrayal, and familial ties were as decisive as armies, illustrating that leadership in the ancient world was inseparable from the human experiences of fear, desire, and love. Trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange added further layers to the drama of the ancient world. The Mediterranean, the Near East, South Asia, and Mesoamerica were all interconnected through networks of commerce, migration, and communication. These connections facilitated not only the spread of goods, but also ideas, religion, and political strategies. Envoys, merchants, and travelers became carriers of intelligence, alliances, and occasionally treachery, influencing the fate of kingdoms far from their homelands. Marriages arranged across political boundaries could strengthen ties or provoke conflict, and acts of personal loyalty or betrayal could alter the course of entire campaigns. In this sense, the ancient world was a vast, intricate web of human relationships, ambition, and consequence, where the decisions of a single individual could ripple outward to reshape societies, empires, and continents. Even as empires fell and rose, the human dramas of the ancient world endured. The stories of kings, generals, queens, and ordinary citizens reveal recurring themes: the pursuit of glory, the consolidation of power, the consequences of betrayal, and the transformative force of love. These patterns remind us that while the names of empires and dynasties may change, the fundamental human experiences that shaped them remain constant. The ambition of Alexander, the cunning of Cleopatra, the ruthlessness of Qin Shi Huang, and the compassion of Ashoka illustrate the diverse ways in which human choices can create history, showing that even millennia ago, the forces of emotion, intellect, and desire were inseparable from the exercise of power. As the ancient world approached its later classical period, the stage was dominated by empires whose scale, sophistication, and complexity were unprecedented, demonstrating both the heights of human ambition and the depths of human fallibility. Rome, having transitioned from republic to empire under Augustus, consolidated its dominion over the Mediterranean and parts of Europe, North Africa, and the Near East, creating a political and cultural influence that would endure for centuries. The early emperors navigated an intricate web of loyalty, betrayal, love, and ambition, understanding that the maintenance of power required not only military might but careful manipulation of perception, law, and family ties. Figures such as Tiberius, Caligula, and Nero illustrate the extremes of leadership, where genius and cruelty, public service, and personal indulgence often coexisted. Within the palaces and the Senate, personal ambition frequently led to conspiracies and assassinations, while marriages, alliances, and affairs intertwined with political strategy, showing how deeply personal relationships influence the course of empires. Love and betrayal were not merely private matters, but instruments of political maneuvering, shaping the lives of citizens, soldiers, and rulers alike. In the East, Persia, once dominant under the Achaemenid Empire, faced cycles of conquest, rebellion, and reorganization, demonstrating the fragility of empires built on diverse populations and vast territories. Following the conquests of Alexander, Persia was divided into smaller kingdoms, yet the legacy of administration, taxation, and cultural synthesis endured, influencing successive empires. Leaders were continually challenged by the tension between ambition and loyalty, with satraps and generals capable of both serving and undermining the central authority. Acts of betrayal, whether through revolt or shifting alliances, could determine the fate of regions and dynasties, illustrating the perennial danger that accompanied the exercise of power in sprawling empires. Love, diplomacy, and family ties were interwoven with these political struggles, reflecting a universal pattern across the ancient world. Personal relationships and human emotion were inseparable from governance, conquest, and survival. Meanwhile, in China, the classical dynasties, the Han, the Zhou, and later the Tang and Han revival periods, refined systems of centralized authority, bureaucracy, and legal administration. Emperors such as Han Wudi expanded borders, strengthened central control, and patronized culture and education. Yet their reigns were marked by palace intrigue, court rivalries, and familial betrayal. Imperial succession was often contested, with brothers, sons, and wives maneuvering for influence, while ministers and generals could become kingmakers or conspirators. The use of marriage alliances to secure political loyalty was a recurring theme, and the intimate relationships within the palace walls often had consequences for the stability of the entire empire. Philosophical traditions, particularly Confucianism and Taoism, provided a framework for governance and morality, yet they could not eliminate the human propensity for ambition, jealousy, and betrayal, showing that even in societies guided by ethical principles, the complex interplay of emotion and power remained central to history. In the Americas, the Maya civilization reached remarkable heights, constructing monumental cities, complex calendars, and extensive trade networks. Kings and priest-kings maintained control through both religious authority and military might, yet they were not immune to betrayal, rivalry, or internal dissent. The interplay of personal ambition, loyalty, and love is evident in the dynastic records, where succession disputes could lead to warfare and marriages were carefully orchestrated to secure alliances. Similarly, in the Andean region, civilizations like the Moche and later the Inca developed intricate social hierarchies and monumental constructions that reflected the ambitions of rulers, while also relying on loyalty and cooperation from their subjects. These civilizations illustrate that the dynamics of kingship, empire, betrayal, and love were not confined to Eurasia, but were universal human experiences shaping societies across the globe. As Rome reached the height of its empire, the interplay of conquest, administration, and personal ambition reached extraordinary complexity. The emperors faced the constant challenge of managing distant provinces, rebellious generals, and court factions, all while cultivating an image of divine authority. Military campaigns, whether in Germania, Britannia, or the East, were as much about consolidating loyalty and demonstrating legitimacy as about territorial expansion. Within the city, political alliances and betrayals could determine the careers of senators, generals, and even the emperor himself. Public spectacles, religious observances, and monumental architecture served not only to entertain and inspire, but also to reinforce the authority of the ruling class and to remind citizens of the intertwined nature of love, loyalty, and obedience. Personal ambition, romantic alliances, and acts of betrayal repeatedly influenced the rise and fall of leaders, confirming that even the mightiest empire is ultimately shaped by human emotion and decision-making. Across these civilizations, certain patterns emerge. The ambitions of rulers could inspire awe and innovation, yet those same ambitions could provoke fear, rebellion, and destruction. Love, whether between spouses, siblings, or allies, could cement alliances or catalyze conflict. Betrayal was a constant shadow, lurking behind every political maneuver, every military campaign, and every familial succession. From the ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the pyramids of Egypt, from the palaces of Macedonia to the courts of China and the temples of the Maya, the stories of the ancient world are populated with human beings whose choices, passions, and flaws left lasting marks on history. These narratives remind us that while empires, borders, and dynasties may rise and fall, the underlying dynamics of human behavior remain remarkably consistent. The ambition that builds, the love that binds, and the betrayal that destroys are as old as civilization itself. Even as civilizations fell, their legacies endured, transmitted through architecture, written records, oral traditions, and cultural memory. The epics of Homer, the legal codes of Hammurabi, the philosophical treatises of Confucius, and the monumental constructions of the Maya are all testaments to the enduring human desire to record, interpret, and immortalize experience. The stories of kings and empires serve as mirrors of human aspiration, illustrating both the capacity for greatness and the inevitability of human error. They reveal how the decisions of individuals, whether motivated by love, fear, or ambition, can reverberate across generations, shaping societies, altering cultures, and influencing the course of history for centuries to come. The ancient world, in all its complexity, teaches us that history is not merely a sequence of dates, battles, or dynasties, but a tapestry woven from human experience, where emotion, intellect, ambition, and moral choice intersect. Betrayal and loyalty, love and ambition, conquest and diplomacy are threads that run through every civilization, from the earliest city-states of Mesopotamia to the sprawling empires of Rome, Persia, China, and the Americas. The remarkable endurance of some civilizations, alongside the dramatic collapse of others, underscores the delicate balance between human agency and circumstance. Leaders may achieve greatness through strategy and vision, yet even the most powerful empires are vulnerable to internal strife, personal weakness, and the unpredictable forces of human nature. In reflecting upon the greatest stories of the ancient world, one is struck by the universality of human experience. Kings, queens, generals, and ordinary citizens all acted within systems of authority, culture, and tradition, yet each decision carried profound consequences. Love could motivate loyalty or spark jealousy. Betrayal could topple dynasties or ignite wars. Ambition could inspire innovation or bring ruin. Across continents and centuries, from the deserts of Egypt to the river valleys of China, from the hills of Greece to the jungles of Mesoamerica, the same patterns repeat. The entanglement of human emotion with the pursuit of power creates the narratives that have captivated generations and continue to teach, warn, and inspire. Ultimately, the story of the ancient world is a testament to the enduring complexity of human life, where ambition, love, and betrayal are inseparable from the shaping of empires. It is a story of extraordinary achievement and profound failure, of individuals whose choices determine the fate of millions, and of societies that rose and fell in patterns both predictable and astonishing. From the earliest kings of Sumer to the emperors of Rome, from the dynasties of China to the civilizations of the Americas, The greatest stories of the ancient world remind us that history is alive with human experience, rich with lessons about power, loyalty, love, and the consequences of our actions. As we look back across the millennia, we see reflected not only the grandeur of empires and the drama of human ambition, but also the timeless truths of human nature that continue to resonate in every era, illuminating the past while providing insight into the present and the future.